The people you're desperately trying to impress don't even remember your name 5 minutes after meeting you. Your family nods politely at your dreams while secretly doubting you'll achieve them. Your friends say they support you, but they're too busy with their own lives to actually show up when it matters. That promotion you've been working toward, your boss has already mentally given it to someone else. Your social media followers scroll past your achievements without a second thought. The harsh truth that most successful people embrace, but you're still avoiding, is this: nobody cares about your success, your struggles, or your journey nearly as much as you think they do. And that revelation might be the most liberating moment of your entire life. The moment you realize nobody really cares about you is the moment your life can truly begin. Now that might sound harsh, but it's one of those painful truths that can actually set you free. Most people spend years, decades even, waiting for someone to care enough about their dreams, their struggles, their potential. They're waiting for someone to discover them, to rescue them, to push them toward greatness. And while they wait, life passes them by. I remember talking to a young man after one of my seminars, bright fellow full of ideas and ambitions. He kept telling me about all these wonderful things he was going to do someday. When I asked him what was stopping him from starting today, he had a list of reasons that all boiled down to one thing. He was waiting for validation, waiting for his parents to support his business idea, waiting for friends to join his venture, waiting for someone to tell him his plan was good enough to pursue, looked him straight in the eye and said something that changed his life. What if nobody ever cares as much about your dreams as you do? What then? His face changed. It was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep. You see, we've been conditioned to believe that our success depends on other people caring about us. Bosses who notice our extra effort, parents who validate our choices, friends who support our ventures, audiences who appreciate our talents. And yes, having support is wonderful when it happens, but making your success dependent on other people's care and attention, that's a recipe for disappointment. The truth is, most people are too busy caring about their own lives, their own problems, their own dreams to invest deeply in yours. They have limited time, limited energy, limited attention, and that's not because they're bad people. It's because they're human, just like you. So instead of seeing this as depressing news, what if we recognized it as the most liberating truth we could discover? What if nobody cares about you? Isn't a sad statement, but the starting point of personal power? Let me explain why expecting others to care about your dreams and ambitions is actually holding you back. It creates a dependency that wasn't meant to exist. When you're waiting for someone else's approval, someone else's permission, someone else's validation before you take action, you've handed over the keys to your life to other people. And those other people, they're busy living their own lives. Think about it this way. How many times have you shared an exciting idea with someone only to receive a lukewarm response? Maybe it was a business concept you thought was brilliant. Maybe it was a personal goal that meant the world to you. You explained it with passion, with fire in your eyes, expecting them to match your enthusiasm. And what happened? They nodded politely, maybe offered some cautious advice, and quickly changed the subject to something else. That moment of disappointment, that's not a sign that your idea lacks merit. It's simply evidence of an important truth. No one will ever care about your dreams as much as you do. No one. Not your spouse, not your parents, not your best friend. No one. I had a fellow tell me once, Jim, I've been waiting 20 years for my big break, 20 years for someone to notice what I have to offer. I asked him, what have you been doing while you've been waiting? Well, preparing, I guess, getting ready for when my chance comes. 20 years of waiting. Can you imagine? That's 2 decades of life spent in the waiting room, while the real action was happening elsewhere. All because he believed someone else would care enough to create his opportunity for him. The real problem with expecting others to care about your success is that it puts you in a position of weakness. You become a beggar instead of a builder. You're standing there with your hand out saying, please care about my future. Please invest in my dreams. Please notice my potential. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying other people won't help you along your journey. They absolutely will, but rarely in the way you expect and almost never on your preferred timeline. The help comes after you've already started moving, not while you're standing still waiting to be pushed. I've studied successful people for decades, and I've noticed something interesting. They don't operate on the assumption that others will care. They operate on the assumption that they must first care enough themselves to take action, regardless of external support or validation. Consider this. When Colonel Sanders was trying to sell his chicken recipe, he was rejected 1009 times before someone finally said yes. Can you imagine if he had stopped after the 100th rejection thinking, well, if people don't care about my recipe, maybe it's not that good after all? We'd never have Kentucky Fried Chicken. Or think about J.K. Rowling. Her Harry Potter manuscript was rejected by 12 publishers. 12. Any one of those rejections could have been the end of the story if she had been waiting for others to care about her work as much as she did. The paradox here is fascinating. When you stop expecting others to care about your dreams and take full responsibility for making them happen yourself, that's often when people start to take notice. That's when they begin to care. I call this the momentum principle. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and they tend to attract attention and assistance. Objects at rest, well, they just collect dust. Let me share another story. I mentored a woman years ago who had an idea for a special kind of educational program for children. She spent months talking about it, planning it, perfecting it on paper. But she wouldn't launch until she had enough people expressing interest, enough parents saying they would definitely enroll their kids. She was waiting for care and commitment before she would commit herself. I finally told her, start with one child, even if it's just your neighbor's kid at your kitchen table. Start there, show that you care enough about this vision to begin, however small. She reluctantly agreed, and you know what happened? That one child became 3 by the end of the first month. Those 3 became 7. Within a year, she had a waiting list. People started caring about her program when they saw it in action, when they saw results. Not when it was just an idea she was talking about. I tell people, stop waiting for applause before you perform. Stop waiting for a crowd before you begin. The crowd comes after you've already taken the stage and shown what you can do. There's something else about this expectation that others should care about your success. It often masks deeper fear. When you say nobody supports me or nobody understands what I'm trying to do, what you might really be saying is if I try and fail without external validation, the failure is all on me. Waiting for others to care provides a convenient excuse not to fully commit yourself. Because as long as you're waiting for that support, that validation, that care from others, you never have to face the terrifying prospect of giving your absolute best and still coming up short. That's the real reason so many of us get stuck in the trap of seeking external care and validation. It's not just that we want the support, it's that we want to buffer against failure. We want someone else to share the responsibility for our dream. We want to be able to say, well, I could have made it if only I'd had more support. But here's the liberating truth. When you accept that nobody cares about your success as much as you do, you also accept complete ownership of your destiny. And complete ownership, while scary, is also where complete power resides. I remember reading about Thomas Edison and how he tried over 10,000 different materials before finding the right filament for his light bulb. 10,000. Do you think anybody cared about those 10,000 attempts? Do you think anybody was cheering him on through failure? Number 8,459. No. Most people probably thought he was wasting his time, but Edison cared. Edison believed, and that was enough. So let me ask you, what dream have you been postponing because you're waiting for others to care about it as much as you do? What action have you been delaying because you don't feel you have enough support? What excuse has nobody cares become in your life? Today might be the day to realize that waiting for others to care is the surest way to ensure your potential remains just that potential, unfulfilled and eventually forgotten. Because while you're waiting for someone to care, life is happening. Time is passing, opportunities are fading, and all along, the only person who needed to care enough to take action was staring back at you in the mirror. Let me tell you about the freedom that comes with self-responsibility. It's extraordinary. When you finally accept that nobody cares about your success as much as you do, something remarkable happens. You become liberated, truly liberated. You're no longer waiting for permission. You're no longer seeking approval. You're no longer dependent on other people's opinions or validation. And that, my friends, is power. I remember a conversation I had with a successful entrepreneur who started with nothing. I asked him, what was the turning point in your life? His answer surprised me. He said, the day I stopped blaming my circumstances and stopped expecting anyone to save me. That's when everything changed. He told me how he'd grown up poor, with little education and fewer opportunities. For years, he was angry at society, angry at his parents, angry at the system that seemed stacked against him. He kept thinking, doesn't anyone care that I'm struggling? Doesn't anyone see I need help? Then one day, sitting in his tiny apartment, unable to pay his bills, he had what he called his moment of truth. He realized that whether anyone cared or not was irrelevant. Whether his situation was fair or not didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was what he was going to do about it. That shift in thinking from why doesn't anyone care about my problems to what am I going to do about my problems changed everything for him. Within 5 years, he had built $1 million business. Not because someone finally cared, but because he finally took full responsibility. This is the paradox of personal power. It begins the moment you stop expecting others to provide it. Now, I'm not saying we don't need other people. We absolutely do. Humans are social creatures. We thrive on connection, cooperation, and community. But there's a huge difference between healthy interdependence and needy dependence. Interdependence says, I am responsible for my life, and I choose to connect with others for mutual benefit. Dependence says, I need others to care about my success before I can succeed. Do you see the distinction? One puts you in the driver's seat. The other makes you a passenger in your own life, waiting for someone else to steer you toward your destination. I've noticed something fascinating in my decades of studying successful people. The ones who truly excel in life aren't necessarily the most talented, the most educated, or the most privileged. They're the ones who take complete ownership of their circumstances. They don't waste energy complaining that nobody cares. They simply care enough themselves to do what needs to be done, whether anyone is watching or not. Look at any great achievement throughout history. Behind each one, you'll find someone who didn't wait for the world to care about their vision. They cared enough themselves to persist despite indifference, despite skepticism, despite outright opposition. When the Wright brothers were trying to build their flying machine, you think the world was cheering them on? No. Most people thought they were crazy. If humans were meant to fly, we'd have wings, they said. But Orville and Wilbur Wright didn't need the world to care about their dream. They cared enough themselves. Some of you might be thinking, but Jim, it's disheartening when nobody seems to care about what I'm trying to accomplish. I understand that feeling. It can be lonely pursuing a dream that others don't see or value yet. But here's the thing. That loneliness, that lack of external validation, it's not a bug in the success journey. It's a feature. It's nature's way of testing how much you care about your goals. If you can keep going when nobody's cheering, if you can stay committed when nobody's watching, if you can remain focused when nobody else believes, that's when you develop the strength of character that success requires. I'm reminded of a story about a young musician who was practicing diligently every day, hour after hour, week after week. His roommate finally asked him, how can you keep practicing when nobody's listening, when there's no audience, no feedback, no applause? And musician smiled and said something profound. I'm not practicing for the people who don't care enough to listen now. I'm practicing for the people who will care enough to pay for tickets later. That's the mindset of someone who understands this principle. He recognized that his job wasn't to make people care about his music before he had mastered it. His job was to care so much about his craft that eventually his excellence would command attention. This is how success actually works. It's not about convincing others to care about your journey early on. It's about caring so deeply yourself that you become uncommonly good at what you do. And then, only then, the world starts to take notice. I want to challenge you with something. For the next 30 days, try living as if nobody cares about your success but you. No complaining about lack of support. No blaming others for not understanding your vision. No waiting for permission or validation. Ask yourself these questions. If I'm the only one who cares about this goal, what would I do differently today? If I'll never get external validation until after I've succeeded, how would that change my actions? If I'm completely responsible for my own success, what excuse would I have to eliminate? This 30-day experiment might just change your life. Because when you stop expecting others to care, you start taking the kind of bold, decisive action that eventually makes them care. Consider this. Nobody cared about Steve Jobs' vision for personal computers until he and Wozniak built one in a garage. Nobody cared about Oprah Winfrey's talent until she outworked everyone around her. Nobody cared about Michael Jordan's potential until his practice ethic became legendary. First comes your commitment, then comes your work, then comes your results, and only then, after all that, comes the care and attention of others. So if you've been waiting for someone to care about your goals before you fully commit to them, you've got the formula backward. Reverse it. Commit first with everything you've got. The care of others will follow your commitment, not precede it. This mindset is the foundation of all great achievement. It's the understanding that your success is your responsibility. Not your friends, not your families, not society's, yours. And in this responsibility lies incredible freedom. Freedom from waiting. Freedom from external validation. Freedom from making others' opinions more important than your own convictions. When you truly accept that nobody cares about your success as much as you do, you stop seeing it as a sad statement about the world and start seeing it as a powerful statement about your opportunity, because it means your success is entirely in your hands. Not anyone else's, yours. And honestly, would you want it any other way? Let me tell you how successful people use this truth as fuel rather than letting it discourage them. See, there's a fundamental difference in how average people and successful people respond to the realization that nobody cares about their dreams as much as they do. Average people hear nobody cares and become victims. Poor me, I'm all alone, nobody supports me, why bother trying? But successful people hear the exact same words and become victors. Nobody cares. Perfect. That means I don't need permission. I don't need consensus. I don't need to wait for anyone. I can start right now on my terms. It's the same truth, but an entirely different response. And that response makes all the difference. I've counseled thousands of people over the years, and I can tell you with certainty, your interpretation of reality shapes your reality more than reality itself. Two people can face identical circumstances and create completely different outcomes based solely on their perspective. Consider this story about two shoe salesmen who were sent to a developing country to assess the market potential. The first salesman called back and said, "Situation hopeless. No one wears shoes here." The second called and excitedly reported, "Incredible opportunity. No one wears shoes here." Same reality, different perspective, completely different outcomes. This is how successful people transform "nobody cares about you" from a discouraging statement to rocket fuel. They don't deny the truth of it. They simply assign it a different meaning. I remember talking with a woman who had built a highly successful business from her kitchen table. She told me when I started, nobody believed in what I was doing. Not my husband, not my friends, not even my own mother. They all thought I was wasting my time. I asked her how she pushed through that lack of support. Her answer was illuminating. I decided their doubt was actually a gift. It meant I had nothing to prove to anyone but myself, no expectations to meet but my own. It was oddly freeing. She continued, each time someone dismissed my business, it just reinforced that this journey was mine alone. And if the journey was mine alone, then so was the glory of succeeding. That became my motivation. This woman transformed "nobody cares" into "nobody gets to take credit but me." That's the alchemy of successful thinking. Or consider another example. A friend of mine who wanted to write a novel. For years he talked about it. For years he collected polite nods and forgotten encouragements. Nobody really cared about his literary ambitions, and eventually this became his excuse for not writing. Then he had a realization. If nobody truly cares whether I write this book or not, then nobody cares if it's terrible either. I have nothing to lose. The only person I need to satisfy is myself. That freedom from others' expectations broke his paralysis. He wrote his book not for an audience that didn't yet exist, but for himself. And ironically, once he finished it, people did care. The book found a publisher and readers who connected with his story precisely because he wrote it without trying to please anyone but himself. Is the secret sauce of using "nobody cares" as fuel. It removes the pressure of external judgment. When you accept that others aren't invested in your dream, you gain the freedom to pursue it on your own terms, following your own wisdom, guided by your own values. Too many people create lives designed to impress people who aren't paying attention anyway. What a waste! What freedom comes when you stop performing for an audience that isn't even watching? I've also noticed that successful people use the "nobody cares" truth to develop rare levels of self-reliance. They don't wait for motivation to come from outside. They generate it from within. Olympic gold medalist once told me about his training regimen. "Most people don't realize that my training happens when nobody's watching." He said, "No coach, no teammates, no audience. Just me pushing myself when I don't feel like it. Continuing when it hurts, practicing the same move thousands of times in empty gyms." I asked him how he stayed motivated without anyone there to push him. He smiled and said, "I learned early on that the crowd only shows up for the performance, never for the practice. If I needed an audience to practice, well, I'd never have made it to the Olympics." That's another way successful people use this truth as fuel. They develop the ability to be self-driven, to find motivation within rather than requiring it from without. When you stop needing others to care about your journey, you become more willing to take risks. Now think about it. Much of what holds people back from taking bold action is the fear of what others will think if they fail. What will they say if this doesn't work out? How will I face them? But when you truly internalize that Most people aren't paying that much attention to your failures or successes anyway. It becomes easier to take the leap. If nobody's watching that closely, the cost of failure decreases dramatically. I worked with an entrepreneur who put it this way. When I realized most people were too busy with their own lives to keep score of my wins and losses, I became much more willing to try things that might not work. That's when my business finally took off. When I started taking risks I previously would have avoided for fear of looking foolish. This is freedom, the freedom to experiment, to try, to fail, to adjust, and to try again without the crushing weight of imagined judgment. There's another aspect to how successful people use the nobody cares principle. They understand that attention must be earned, not expected. They don't demand care and attention up front. They focus on creating something worthy of attention first. Think about the products or services you truly care about. Did you care about them before you experienced their value? Of course not. You came to care because they delivered something meaningful to you. The care followed the value. This is how market economies work, how human attention works, how the world works. Value first, attention second, never the other way around. Successful people grasp this natural order. Instead of saying, care about what I'm doing so I can succeed, they say, let me succeed at creating value, and then the care will follow naturally. I remember talking to a man who had become quite wealthy by solving a specific problem in his industry. I asked him if it was difficult getting people interested in his solution early on. I didn't need people to be interested in my solution. I just needed them to be bothered by the problem. The problem already had their attention. I just redirected that attention to my solution. That's brilliant. He didn't try to force people to care about him or his business. He identified what they already cared about and positioned himself as relevant to that existing concern. This is how you transform. Nobody cares about you from a depressing reality into a strategic advantage. You stop trying to generate care from nothing and instead tap into what people already care about, their problems, their desires, their needs. The truth is, people don't care about you or your goals, but they do care about themselves. They care about their own problems, their own aspirations, their own lives. When you can connect what you're doing to what they already care about, that's when you get their attention. This isn't manipulative. It's just human nature. And successful people understand human nature rather than fighting against it. So let me ask you, are you using the nobody cares truth as an excuse to do nothing or as fuel to do anything? Are you letting it paralyze you or are you letting it liberate you? Because the reality won't change. People will continue to be primarily focused on their own lives. What can change is how you respond to that reality, whether you use it as a reason to give up or as motivation to stand out. The choice, as always, is yours.